Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been assassinated. He was 67 years old and was the longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan. He was fatally shot at a campaign rally earlier in the morning in the city of Nara at around 11:30 a.m. local time. Videos show that a man dressed in a grey top and brown trousers began moving towards Abe from behind. He fired at least 2 apparent gunshots. Witnesses say that Abe collapsed, visibly bleeding, and bystanders began to administer cardiac massage. The shooter was wrestled to the ground and then taken into custody. Shocked by Abe's killing, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that he cannot find words to express how he feels.
It is a barbarian act amid election campaigns, which are the foundation of democracy, and is absolutely unforgivable. I condemn with the strictest words.
The doctors of the Nara Medical University Hospital say that Abe lost a lot of blood. They tried blood transfusion after a hemorrhage was observed, but could not save his life. Officials say the former Prime Minister showed no vitals when he was airlifted to the hospital. The national broadcaster said that Abe suffered a gunshot wound to the right side of his neck.
Our hospital made efforts to revive him, but unfortunately he passed away at 5:03 p.m. By the time he got to us, there were 2 bullet wounds in his neck. He was showing no signs of life, presumably due to the damage to his major blood vessels and heart. We performed a blood transfusion and also tried to stop the bleeding, but unfortunately, he didn't make it.
The suspect, a 41-year-old gunman, was arrested at the scene of the attack, and as per local reports, he is believed to be a former member of Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force, the country's equivalent of a navy. He reportedly used a handmade weapon. For more details, we are now being joined by Tomohiko Taniguchi from Tokyo. He is a former special advisor to the cabinet of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Mr. Taniguchi, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond. This news has shocked the world at large. Mr. Abe was the longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan. You, of course, have worked closely with him. I'm certain you're shocked by what has happened. Any memories or anecdotes that stand out for you, and, of course, the legacy he leaves behind?
Thank you. It's definitely been a day of sadness and anger towards the criminal that killed the single greatest leader the nation has ever had. He was a transformative leader, a born strategist, and that his strategizing that was so natural brought Japan ever closer to India.
Right.
India has always had a special place in Shinzo Abe, and I wonder if you could confirm with me a piece of news that I heard, that India is going to have a day of remembrance for Shinzo Abe.
Right, of course, this is, as we understand, Prime Minister Modi has expressed grief. More details will trickle in, and of course, we'll get that piece of news to you. I just have a follow-up to that. This assassination, the shocking assassination, has sparked outrage and condemnation. What can you tell us about what Japanese authorities are saying as of now?
Japanese authorities, both government, bureaucracy, have lost words, and it's been unanimous across the political spectrum, from the far left communist to his own party, of course, that stood up and condemned the brutal act. And the gun used was rumored to have been made by additive engineering, the 3D printing machine. How could we avoid such an adventurous act and brutal act? And that was a shock to the nation.
Absolutely, sir. Now, such a horrifying incident in broad daylight, that too in Japan, has sparked security concerns as well. What's the situation on the streets of Tokyo as of now?
Well, it's as usual. People are walking across the city without paying much attention to their own security. And But once every while, you get this sort of individual who is so much outlier, in a sense, from the Japanese standard of safety.
Absolutely. Sir, you know, before I let you go, I have to ask this question. Because you work so closely with the late Premier, any memories that stand out for you?
Well, I think the closeness between Narendra Modi and Shinzo Abe. And also, Shinzo Abe called Narendra Modi's predecessor, Manmohan Singh, his own mentor. And Narendra Modi and Shinzo Abe were both soulmates. What I regret is that Shinzo Abe could not make it to visit India in the winter of 2019, shortly prior to us being visited by COVID-19.
Right, absolutely. But incidentally, it gives us great pride to say this, that WION was actually one of the last international channels that got an exclusive conversation with him. And we'll definitely be airing that for all our viewers across the world. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us. It's a sad day indeed. Born into a prominent political family, Shinzo Abe has been Japan's longest-serving prime minister. He was credited with bringing a degree of stability to Japan following a period of economic turmoil and constant power tussles. Abe angered neighbors South Korea and China with his nationalistic rhetoric. Even some in the country were angry by his calls to revise the country's pacifist constitution. Let's now look back at some key dates and moments in Abe's life and career. Shinzo Abe was born in Tokyo to Shintaro Abe, who served as Japan's foreign minister. His grandfather, Nobusuke Kishi, was a former prime minister of Japan. Abe graduated from the Seikei University in Tokyo with a degree in political science, and after this he moved to the United States. He studied public policy at the University of Southern California for 3 semesters. In 1979, he began working at Kobe Steel as the firm was expanding its presence abroad, and soon he left the company to pursue new positions at the Foreign Ministry. In 1993, he was first elected as a Liberal Democratic Party legislator, representing the southwestern prefecture of Yamaguchi. Abe eventually led the party's largest faction, Seiwakai, that had once been headed by his father. In 2005, Abe was appointed as the Chief Cabinet Secretary under Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi. He led negotiations to return Japanese citizens abducted to North Korea. The same year, he was elected as head of the Liberal Democratic Party. This put him in line to take over as Prime Minister. On September 26, in 2006, Abe becomes Japan's Prime Minister for the first time, overseeing economic reform, while taking a hard line on North Korea. He also sought to engage with South Korea and China. But his first tenure was short-lived. The LDP faced electoral defeats, losing control of the legislature. Abe soon resigned as Prime Minister, citing health reasons. Abe had been suffering from ulcerative colitis, but eventually was able, in fact, to control it with due course of medication. Japan's revolving prime ministerial doors brought him back to office in 2012. It ended a turbulent period in which prime ministers were changed every year. In 2013, Abe launched his Abenomics policies, seeking to boost growth. The scheme to revive Japan's economy involved vast government spending, massive monetary easing, and cutting red tape. On the international stage, Abe took a hard line on North Korea, but sought a peacemaker role between the United States and Iran. Between 2014 to 2020, Abe served 2 additional terms as Prime Minister. During this, he developed close relations with then US President Donald Trump. They held summits, and when golfing together, Abe also pursued a hard line with South Korea over unresolved wartime disputes, continuing to float plans to revise Japan's pacifist constitution. Throughout his tenure, he weathered political storms, but all of it did very little to affect his power He was due to stay on as Prime Minister until late 2021. This was supposed to give him an opportunity to see the Olympics in his tenure. But in 2020, he suddenly stepped down as Prime Minister. And this was due to health reasons, after his ulcerative colitis flared up yet again. We earlier also spoke to James D.J. Brown, who is an international affairs expert professor from Tokyo in Japan, of course. Let's now take a look at what he had to say.
I think the first point is about the visibility of Japan. I think prior to Abe's return to power in 2012, there was a period of time when Japan really wasn't getting much attention. It seemed like there was this constant turnover of prime ministers, and people weren't really, paying attention to Japan's important role economically and politically. Abe changed that by saying that Japan would never be a second-rank country and really trying to promote Japan on the world stage. And one of the ways that he did this is loosening the post-war restrictions on Japan's actions as a military power. So he reinterpreted the constitution. He also boosted defense spending. He didn't actually revise the constitution entirely, but it was towards that direction that he was moving.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.